Hey guys, I'm Naguura, and today we're going to be talking about the 9.1.5 announcements for World of Warcraft Shadowlands. Before I go into that, I just quickly wanted to address me playing a lot of Final Fantasy and not streaming so much WoW, because lots of people, of course, are subscribed to my YouTube channel and also watch my stream because of WoW, and I just quickly wanted to explain what is going on. First of all, I am still playing WoW, of course, and I'm not intending on quitting at all. The reason why I'm playing a lot of Final Fantasy at the moment is because I'm being part of this project with Max where we're doing the raids blind, and I'm having a lot of fun. It's really, really enjoyable. That's why I'm playing a lot. And another reason why I'm not playing that much WoW currently is because 9.1 was a patch that I think we can all agree on wasn't really that great. And lots of content in there is just not something that I enjoy that much. And especially because I am done raiding now, so we killed Mythic Sylvanas. And that is usually the content I enjoy the most, right? I enjoy raiding a lot and I also enjoy Mythic Plus. The problem with Mythic Plus at the moment is that I am personally not the biggest fan of the Shadowlands dungeons. And I did enjoy M+, and I played a lot in the first season with the Pride affix. But now with the new affix and with the changes to Moonkin, I was just not really feeling the dungeons that much. It might change eventually when I'm not so busy playing Final Fantasy blind raids, but at the moment it just feels like there's this project going on in Final Fantasy. I'm having a lot of fun doing that, so why play Mythic Plus, which is something that I necessarily don't enjoy as much at the moment, if I can just do something that I do enjoy, right? So I'm, again, not quitting WoW at all. It's just at the moment not so fun to me, especially the content that is, outside of raiding content, and that's why I'm playing a lot of Final Fantasy. But I'm still playing WoW, of course, and you can always watch my raid that is on Thursday, and I'm also gonna upload some more content about WoW in the future again, of course, whenever there's changes like this, like 9.1.5 announcements, or if I ever decide to play a lot of M+ again, then we're gonna upload that content too. There's that. Now let's go into those changes that we have all been waiting for so long. Finally, they decided to pull the ripcord, and now we're going to be able to switch covenants freely as long as we have reached a certain renown level with that covenant. So I personally am so glad they finally did this. I definitely think it's long overdue. I understand why they didn't necessarily do it from the start, considering that their whole philosophy for Shadowlands was basically the covenants. So I guess it made sense to me that they wouldn't allow that, but it's good that they finally changed it so you are freely allowed to swap. The one thing that is going to be a bit annoying still is that you need to have a certain renown level to switch the covenant. And I think that is something that they should address for sure. Like the catch-up mechanic for renown is fine, but the problem is also that you have to catch up on a lot of the main story, like the Covenant campaign. That is always the thing that was like super daunting to me. I know a lot of people enjoy the Covenant story and enjoy like going through that, but it just seems like if you have multiple characters and you have to do that on multiple characters, especially if you want to unlock all of the Covenants, and you need to get it to a certain renown level, that might be something that can still be annoying and just daunting to think about. It's like, oh, if I want to play Necrolord, I'm going to have to switch there. I'm going to have to farm all of this renown and get all of the story done. And that just might be something that is still something that just takes too long. So maybe that's something they should address as well. A big reason why, in my opinion, a lot of people are just upset with or demotivated with Shadowlands in general is this like feeling that there's so much you have to do on like new characters. And that's something we're also going to talk about later with like the alt friendliness. But it's not just alt friendliness, it's also like all of the covenants that you have to catch up on. And that's something that I think they should address more. Definitely. I am never a person that plays a lot of alts. The reason why that is because I'm basically just thinking about what I have to do on those alts and to keep them up to date for rating progression. It seems like this unsurmountable like amount of chores and things that you have to do to get caught up, and it just is so demotivating for me because it's all of this content is not necessarily fun after you've already done it once, right? And even the first time, it might not be that fun. So I hope that is something they'll address more as well. But again, this is an awesome thing that they're doing. This is awesome news that they're making the Covenant switchable freely. And I'm just excited for this to finally go live. And I cannot wait. I'm excited to be able to switch around different Covenants for different specs, for different aspects of the game. So I can play Naguura Lord in PvP, I can play Night Fae as Rested Druid, I can play Venthyr as Moonkin, and so on. It's just going to be amazing, and I cannot wait for this to actually go live. Let's go on to the next news that we had. Conduit Energy. Alright, so they finally gave in and removed Conduit Energy. There's not really much to say about it, in my opinion. This is just something that they should have done a long time ago. I am not sure why they waited so long to do this. And this is the only thing that I never, really understood. Because most of the time when there's a change that is not liked by the community, I think about it logically and I think of the reasons why they do it the way they do it. And then usually I can come up with a logical explanation or a reasonable explanation on why they're doing things. But for Conduit Energy, that was the one thing that always just I didn't understand it. They had this explanation of they don't want people to feel forced to constantly go to their Covenant Hall and change their conduits. Which, yes, I understood. But there would have been things they could have done to still have that, but not have it be so daunting for off-specs, right? For example, they could have said the conduits are bound to your spec. So if I'm Rested Druid, then I have these conduits in my Soulbind. If I switch to Moonkin, then they're different conduits, right? Kind of like talents. So you just switch the conduits with your spec. That is something they could have done, and then the Conduit Energy wouldn't even have been that bad overall, right? Because that's the main issue people had with it. The main issue was people wanted to play multiple specs and it just didn't work out with the energy. That was the only time people actually didn't have enough conduit energy. So by having conduits be spec specific, they would have not had the issue of people not being able to play off specs, but you still would have solved the problem of people not having to constantly go and change them between encounters, right? Because if you switch your spec, you automatically also switch your conduits, right? So I never understood why they didn't band-aid fix it this way, because that would have been a great compromise, right? People want conduit energy removed, and Blizzard could have said, okay, you know what, we're not going to remove it, but now your conduits are spec-specific, like talents. I feel like that would have been the best thing they could have done. No one would have probably had a problem with it anymore. But they never addressed it, and now they're removing it, which, again, is great. Just something that I never understood. And I'm not sure they necessarily understood why either. So I'm just glad they're finally giving in and doing this. I hope stuff like this does not happen again in the future, because it just seems to be a reoccurring issue with WoW in general, where there's something they do, people give negative feedback about it, and it just takes them months and months and patches for it to be addressed in a way that the community actually accepts, right? So on one hand, I understand why they're not immediately always giving in to player feedback, because if they would do that, if they would give in to every player feedback, then that would be chaotic, obviously. But some things, it just seems like they could give in without it being a majorly disruptive thing. It would just be almost as out of principle, you know? It's lots of players want this thing. If we change it, it might not be the thing that we wanted, but if everyone wants this, then we can change it without it majorly affecting the player base in a negative way. And I think that's conduit energy, right? Removing conduit energy is very unlikely to be an insanely negative impact on the player base, right? I think we can all agree on this. Unless it actually would have... The only negative impact that I can see is that possibly people would have felt the need to constantly go and change their conduits. But if that actually would have happened, well, then they can just come up with a different solution, right? Because that's the only, in my mind at least, that's the only negative outcome that would really negatively affect people. And if that actually would have happened, which I don't think it will, but if it would have happened, then surely they could have come up with another solution, like, for example, the spec-specific conduits that I just mentioned before. So just not giving it at all and not changing it at all and just not really like helping out with the problem that the community has. It just feels like they're really not listening, and that is a problem that Blizzard already has with WoW. People always feel like that they're not listening, they're always doing things out of spite, and they want the game to be bad, like all these kind of like rumors that go around. I think it would go a long way if they sometimes would give us things that we ask for, if they're like smaller things that wouldn't necessarily affect the player base in a bad way. If it's like something super major, then I understand if they don't immediately give in. If they have like a different design idea behind it, then I get it. If it's like a major change to the game. But if it's like something small like this, then it just seems like, come on, just please. But anyway, overall, of course, it's insanely good changes. Conduit Energy being gone, Covenant restrictions being gone, amazing. Let's have more of this kind of stuff. And let's save Shadowlands, all right? But we're going in a very good direction. All right, now moving forward, we also have changes to Domination Sockets. I personally am not a fan of Domination Shards, and I think a lot of people can agree that they maybe don't like the system as much. Some people like it or they don't mind it, but I think a lot of people had an issue with how they have been acquired, how you get the Domination Shards, and then also the fact that you're restricted which pieces actually activate your bonus. And that is something they're addressing now. So basically, what they're going to change is that there's going to be more pieces of Domination Socket items that activate your bonus, and not just the head, the shoulders, or the chest, which is definitely an improvement. I personally just think maybe you should remove it completely, because I never necessarily understood the reason why it's restricted in which pieces you can equip. But, if it's in there, then it makes sense that you would have multiple like activators of the set. So I like this change a lot. This is going to help out a lot of people, because it's the worst feeling if you have all three of a type. Like let's say you have 3 Unholy Shards, but you're just missing the activator and it just doesn't drop for like weeks and weeks and weeks. And that just feels so bad, right? So I totally feel for people who are just not getting this one piece that they needed to activate that bonus. So I'm really glad that they're addressing this issue here. Still doesn't make me like the shard bonuses and the shard system, but I actually hope they're not going to bring this back for next raid. Because I was thinking that they maybe test a system like this, because that's something that Blizzard likes to do. Blizzard likes to come up with new like systems/ideas on how to give you borrowed power, because that's what shards are. They are basically borrowed power, right? Kind of like a set bonus. And they don't want it to be like the same thing all the time, so they're trying to mix it up with kind of different ideas. And some of them work and are great, and some of them just don't work out so well. And I think shards is definitely a system that I personally don't like it as much. I think the main reason why it's not received that well, at least from me, is the fact that the bonuses themselves are boring. If the bonuses themselves would be more interesting, the system itself maybe wouldn't even be that bad. But it seems like a really convoluted, like complex system for not much, right? Of course, you gain a lot of power from it, but it's such a like quote unquote boring power, right? And I personally don't think that is so much fun, right? So you have like the Stygian Embers, and you have the Shards, and then you have the Domination Sockets, and you need an activator. And it's just such a complex, weird system that lots of people, it almost seemed like you need to have like a PhD to understand how the system even works. And then once you have it and it's activated and you have the bonus, then you get a buff once in a while that gives you more stats. And it's like, oh, well, okay. It just seems a little bit underwhelming for how complex it is, right? So that's why I hope either they go away from the system at all, or they change it up heavily by making the bonuses more interesting, and maybe also make the acquirement of the shards better, and not so, like you can just be incredibly unlucky and not get the bonus for weeks, and that just feels very bad. So the acquisition should be different in my opinion. And also the bonuses themselves should be just more interesting. Maybe even spec specific. That is something that I personally always push for. Whenever there's like spec specific bonuses, set bonuses, borrowed power, anything that is specifically made for your spec, then it just automatically becomes more interesting because it can directly affect your abilities that are part of your rotation and change up the way you play your character. And I think that is a big reason why people used to love tier sets and why people were okay with that borrowed power, right? Because a lot of people have a problem with borrowed power, but I don't think the problem lies within the actual general idea of borrowed power, but the idea of it being so complex and so boring, right? Because a set bonus is also borrowed power, a tier set, except it actually makes you change the way you play your character, and then when the next raid comes out, you drop the old set, get the new set, and then you change the way you play your character again. And that just created this cycle throughout an expansion where you would constantly, from raid to raid, actually adjust your rotation to the new set bonus and to the new borrowed power that you've been getting. And that was the fun part about sets, right? If they could recreate that situation with a different borrowed power system, then I'm okay with that. I don't need to have set bonuses. It can be a different system as long as the idea behind it stays the same. If shard bonuses would be spec specific and actually give you something that changes the way you play your character, and then next raid you drop the old shards and get the new shards or whatever they're going to be called, then I'm fine with that, right? The way the system works is not that important to me. The thing that is important to me is what the system gives me, what kind of bonus I get. If it's a boring bonus, well, then I'm probably not going to like it. If the bonus is interesting and actually changes the way I play, then that's fun, because that's how you don't get boring rotations that are always staying the same throughout the whole expansion, right? And people are saying legendaries are replacing tier sets, but the problem with legendaries are they don't change necessarily from one raid to the other. The only way they change is through tuning by Blizzard. If Blizzard nerfs your best legendary and buffs another legendary, well, yeah, then you play the different legendary and that automatically changes the rotation. But that feels much more unnatural. It also gets more hate towards Blizzard too, in my opinion, right? Because people hate it when Blizzard nerfs stuff. So if you have a legendary that's really good for your spec and they nerf it, then your immediate reaction is a negative one. But if it would naturally be replaced by a new system from the new raid, then this negative feeling doesn't really, it's gone, right? Because you know that you're going to be losing that borrowed power once you acquire it. We know that, the next raid comes out, I'm going to be dropping my old tier set and get the new one. Or I'm going to be dropping my old shard system and get the new one. That's something that you already know. But when you have a legendary, why would you assume that this legendary is going to be bad next year? Because the only way it's going to be bad is if Blizzard nerfs it. So that is something that you don't expect to happen necessarily. And therefore, it does have this negative feeling involved with it. And same with Covenants as well, by the way. Covenants is not something that automatically or naturally changes throughout the expansion, partly because the Soulbinds and the Conduits are boring, but that's a different story. But Covenants are also not necessarily changing throughout the expansion unless Blizzard interferes. Unless Blizzard says, hey, we're nerfing this Covenant and we're buffing this Covenant, and now your best Covenant is this other one, right? So that changes the way you play your class, but not naturally throughout the expansion. Rather, Blizzard is nerfing it and buffing it, right? And that always just has a negative effect when you think about it, because, it's Blizzard making my Covenant bad. Thanks, Blizzard, If you would change the way you play your class naturally throughout the patches without it having to be a nerf, but rather a new system that you acquire in the new raid, then that automatically would feel better. And I think that is something they could naturally implement into the Soulbind system as well. I'm confused on why Blizzard is not doing that, because one thing they could do, because the Soulbind system just gives you new Soulbinds the more renown you have. So each patch, you get more Conduit slots and more Soulbind slots, right? And they could make those Soulbinds more interesting, theoretically. They could also have conduits added each patch that only go into those lower slots. And those conduits could change the way you play your character too, right? Because we have spec-specific conduits that do something for your spec specifically. But most of them are not very interesting. Most of them are pretty boring. They're you're going to get these stats, or you're going to be doing a little bit more damage with this, or you're going to be doing a little bit more damage with that. And that's just that's not a creative way on buffing your character. So if the Conduit would be more creative, the Soulbind would be more creative, then this whole natural process of your character changing over the course of an expansion would happen without this negative thought process of Blizzard actually buffing or nerfing your class, right? And I really hope Blizzard is actually going to start doing that again, because a lot of this negativity towards Blizzard, I think, is partly because of the way they're handling expansions nowadays with these patches, right? Like all the patches just seem like you're playing the lottery. Is your class going to be nerfed? Is your class going to be buffed? Do you have to play a different legendary? Do you have to play a different covenant? All of this just feels it has such a negative effect on the community, especially for people who have been playing a covenant for so long and they have had a legendary for so long, and then all of a sudden it's not the best covenant anymore and it's not the best legendary anymore, and now they have to completely reform a new legendary and they have to go and level up this new covenant, and it's just bad. I personally am just not a fan of this, and I really hope they're addressing this and just change up the way they are changing classes throughout the expansion, because there's so many solutions to this on how they could actually make it more natural, and they just have to pick one, just pick one of those and actually change the way your classes work, your specs work, without necessarily nerfing or buffing things all the time. All right, moving on. Sorry, that was a big rant about borrowed power, but it's a subject that I've been talking about a lot, and it just feels like we're just going away from that more and more, and I would just hate that to be a normal thing for the next couple of expansions. So hopefully that's something that gets addressed in the future. And yeah, let's move on to Legion Timewalking. That's something I'm really excited about. So basically what they're going to be doing, they're introducing Legion Timewalking for the Legion Mythic Plus dungeons as well, which is amazing because I loved the Mythic Plus dungeons in Legion. I think a lot of people loved it, and some of the dungeons are their favorite dungeons from the last 3 expansions. Part of it might be because it was the novelty of M+, right? It's very possible that some dungeons, if they would be introduced now, they might not be as enjoyable as we thought they were back then, just because, M+ was new and people maybe didn't perfectly optimize everything yet. We didn't have MDT for so long in Legion, right? People just kind of went in and they did their thing, right? They improvised on their way to see how much percentage they get. Nothing was perfectly planned out beforehand. So maybe that was part of the reason why people remember those dungeons in such a good way. Maybe it would be different now. But that's why I like Mythic Plus Legion coming back for the Timewalking. Not sure exactly how it's going to work with the scaling and everything, because of course classes in Legion work very differently. So we'll see how that's going to work out. We also have AoE cap in place now, which is a complete other story I cannot address in this video because it would be too long. AoE cap was not a thing in Legion, and that was also part of why the dungeons were so much fun, in my opinion. Because one of the dungeons that I remember I just enjoyed so much was Neltharion's Lair, where you just went in and you did this big pull at the start. You jumped down the waterfall and you pulled the whole area. The tank would just run through and come back with the whole trash, and you just gathered it all up, pop Bloodlust, you AoE'd, and then most of the time it didn't die instantly, so you had to start running and kiting it out a bit. And it was so exciting and it was so much fun. And you saw those big damage numbers coming up, and it just felt amazing. And I wonder how much fun it's going to be with the AoE cap in place. Of course, there's a lot of classes who don't have that cap. Fire Mage, for example. So yeah, we'll see. I'm excited for it though. I'm excited to try the Mythic Plus Dungeons in Legion. It's gonna be a lot of fun, I think. Then we're gonna move on to the Anima Transfer to alts in 9.1.5. So they basically said if your Covenant Sanctum is upgraded fully, then you can transfer Anima to your alts. This is great news for people because people had an overflow of Anima whenever Korthia came out. So it's good to know that you can transfer that to your alts. That is great. I personally am not someone who cares about their Anima that much because I don't care about Sanctum upgrades, but a lot of people do care, and it's great to see that they're addressing this issue. Then we're moving on with the Maw intro being skippable in 9.1.5. This is just another alt-friendly thing that they're doing, and we need more of this. Like, alt friendliness and off-spec friendliness is something that's just like a big problem to me personally, because I always was a person that people always thought I don't like to play other classes. People always ask me, Naguura, why don't you play anything else? Why didn't you play other classes? And the reason was never that I don't enjoy other classes, because I do. I enjoy probably almost every class in this game. The problem that I have with alts is the fact that you have to keep up multiple characters to be able to play them in current content. That is so much work. It's already a lot of work on your main character with all the chores and all of the things that you have to do nowadays in the way WoW works, right? With Renown and with the Korthia and with Stygian Embers and with the Soul Ash, Soul Cinders, like all of this stuff that you need to catch up on alt characters. It's just such a... I think about it, I was like, Demon Hunter would be kind of fun, or I kind of would want to play Mage. And then I think of the things that I would have to do to be able to catch up on those characters, and I will just not do it. I know for a fact that I will just not keep up those characters. I won't enjoy it, and I won't have fun doing it. And even if I level them up to max level and I get them caught up to like the current stand, at some point I will just stop keeping them up to date, because it's just boring, and it's so daunting and annoying that you have so much chores to do all the time. So I hope there's going to be more things like this that make alts less annoying, really, to keep up, because I think a lot of people would just love the idea of being able to play multiple characters without it being millions and millions of chores and like hours of time investment into things that you've already done on your main. So yeah, more changes like this, please. That would be amazing. And yeah, that was my review of most of the changes I have seen so far in 9.1.5 that are like major changes. I know there's a lot of smaller ones as well, and most of them are good changes. I don't think I've read anything that was like negative. So we're definitely moving in a good direction now. I really hope this is gonna help WoW and the current state of it, because the current state of it is just not great. It's really not in the greatest place at the moment, and I can feel it myself. You know, I didn't have as much fun playing WoW since I would say almost like March, April, when the patch dragged out for so long and it just became, and then 9.1 came out and it was kind of underwhelming. And yeah, I just hope we're going into a good direction now, and I hope we can save Shadowlands, because at the start of Shadowlands, I was really excited and I loved everything about Shadowlands at the start. So seeing it go like this and actually having so much negativity surrounding it for so long and having such a bad memory of it, it just hurts, right? So I definitely want it to be salvaged, and I want Shadowlands to succeed in the next couple of patches, and I hope that's gonna happen. So yeah, hope is high. Definitely no copium. And yeah, that was it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Remember to subscribe to my channel for more videos like these, and also, of course, Final Fantasy content as well. And yeah, go over to my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Naguura, and you can watch me play Final Fantasy live. Sometimes I play WoW too. And yeah, have a nice day, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.